Feels Good Talk. I'm Joy Gina with Solutions by Joy Gina.
And I'm Michelle with Bad Cat Digital, 24 hours away from vacation and not giving many rips about many things.
I was just like, you vacation brain.
But I still did well enough to not swear in that particular moment in time.
And we're here at our crack of dawn moment.
Yes.
And we're glad you're here joining us today. We are going to talk about something today. It's called time blindness.
This is like, I know nothing about this.
I brought graphs.
You did. You brought charts.
I'll
with
have
all
links
kinds of
to all of my infographs and charts.
Long words on them.
Yes.
About brain parts.
I know. But this is the only one we care about.
Okay, the cerebellum.
Yes, we can ignore all the rest.
Okay.
This is the important one.
So what is time blindness?
Here's what's really interesting. They really started studying time blindness about 1993.
Okay.
And the reason they started studying it kind of more than they had in the past was because it had, they're finding it in dementia.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right. So all of a sudden it mattered, and there's more money in dementia. And the reason I point this out is because it's been around in the neurodiversity world for a very long time. They've been aware of it probably since the 60s when they started to really label things. So I have an amount of time blindness. I would tell you there's a level of it, but it is a part of the brain. It's in the back. It is the cerebellum, and it regulates our ability to know and understand time. It does. It feels
so time. that feeling that you have of time passing, which, by the way, we're not talking about, I'm pretty sure, help me understand.
Yep.
We're not talking about how when something is really enjoyable, time seems to move faster. And when something is really hard or dreaded, time moves slower.
No, we're talking about the inability to comprehend exactly, like, this is going to take 5 minutes and it really takes 2 hours and you missed 3 appointments in that time. Like
and the 2 hours and 5 minutes feel the same.
Yes. They have the equal amount of weight. Like you get.
I really have a hard time imagining that.
For people, and I have some clients that have this really extremely, it's almost impossible to not live by stopwatches and timers.
Sure.
Because
like you'd have to. Oh my gosh, you'd be late to everything.
But thank goodness for it, because it is why we have a lot of great art also.
Oh.
If artists,
because people can get into the flow.
Right.
They don't have that thing that tells them
nothing.
That
goes
internal
off
thing that
like,
tells them, oh my gosh, it's been an hour since I checked on the kids.
I've got to do this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, they're 100% present.
Interesting.
So one of the gifts of time blindness, if you have a parent that has this or something like that, is their immense amount of direct attention
and super hyper focus.
Right. So if they're playing
for long periods of time,
right? If they're playing with their kids and they're doing this adventure outdoors, I have a friend that describes this about his dad. They would go on these long, like, treasure hunts and these things off in the woods, and it was so much fun because his dad had no idea they'd been out there for 5 hours. And they'd come back in and they're like, you've missed lunch. Like, there's this and this, and who cares?
The kids haven't eaten in 5 hours. Right. What's going on with
who cares? We've had so much fun.
Okay.
Because it's super present.
From a neurotypical standpoint,
yes.
This, and like, it's very common for me to experience someone who's late or behind or doesn't show up for something as rude.
Yes.
And so this would challenge that.
It would immensely challenge
that kind of cultural expectation of timeliness, which is really, really prevalent in the United States in ways that it's not prevalent in other cultures. So this is not a universal human thing.
It is not.
This is a cultural expectation.
Yep.
And it would also really challenge the concept of another person valuing my time because they don't experience their time the same way. So the cultural expectation I have of them valuing my time the way I understand it, I need to probably let that go a little bit.
Which won't be easy.
No.
Like I want to, like, I've had these deeper conversations with people that are very good at time and very efficient with their time and everything is, in its little buckets and stuff. And it's a painful experience for them.
But at the same time, I mean, how horrible would it be to experience time blindness and live in a world that then judges you for it consistently and constantly?
It's awful.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Once I became really aware about this, and I've written quite a few blogs at this point, if you want to check them out on my website, like this is a conversation I'm doing, speaking events about this and so forth, just trying to get the word out there, because there's an immense amount of shame and blame.
Of course.
That coats with this. So you put it on like as a person who has it, when I'm late, I tack on some shame and blame.
Yeah.
If the person across from me, though, is a very structured person and my being late has offended them, they now feel they have the right to pile on more shame, blame, and guilt and try and understand what's wrong with me. Like how, and before I had this language to tell them, I've had people in business situations be like, what's wrong with you? How come you are so late? Like, that's so disrespectful. I've lost clients because of it.
Wow.
Because they've just been like, you obviously cannot handle anything because you can't be on time.
Yeah. I mean,
and I understood how they made those leaps.
Of course.
And I felt shaming, blaming, and slapping on a bunch of labels.
Yeah.
Wasn't it, but I didn't have this language to say, I have this. So at times, this is when my life gets really, really busy. Mm-hmm. This is going to get on you. And I'm sorry. It's all over me all the time. But every once in a while, this is going to get on us.
Well, and what's interesting to me is, we've had conversations about this before.
Right.
We've had conversations about, the passage of time, whether it be hours or days or minutes or whatever. And, often you'll say things to me like, no, let's just do it right now.
Yes.
And I'll be like, but I have a thing in 10 minutes and this is going to take 20 minutes long. And it's hard. That conversation is hard to navigate.
It is
between us.
Yes.
Because I'm looking at it going, right, but I have 5 minutes of stuff to do in the 10 minutes that I have, and this is going to take, like, I'm thinking,
and you understand
because I understand those concepts,
right.
And it never really occurred to me.
And you understand that this will only take 5 minutes. One of the real crappy parts of time blindness is our inability to judge how long something will take.
Yeah.
If it's pleasurable, it's 5 to 10 minutes. Could be 2 hours long.
Sure.
But in my head, the little voice says, that'll take 5-10 minutes.
Well, and the thing is,
and then things though that are really unpleasurable, we make those take 100 hours. Like literally, we look at them and we're like,
it's a method of procrastination, because I do that same thing. And I think this is the point. I think that there are ways that, it's not time blindness, and I would never claim it to be time blindness. But I think there are ways that neurotypical people experience time differently in different situations. And I use thinking something's going to take too long to procrastinate. I mean, I use it to procrastinate though. And that's going to be the difference, because I'm intentionally, my brain is tricking me to doing it, versus having something that just doesn't exist in my cerebellum.
Yes.
For whatever reason. And
good point.
And saying it in a way that is like, okay, that's not time blindness. That's just me being a jerk and not putting my clothes away because the pile looks so big and it looks like it's going to take like 3 hours, when my rational self knows it's going to take 15 minutes. And I just am not wanting to do it.
Thank you. Like, as you're pointing that out, I'm like, that's just brilliant, because you're right. It takes the neurology we already have, that I have with time blindness, and then it adds it to just the human experience. Right. But because I don't have that regulator.
You're not choosing. And that's the thing. I choose.
Yeah. See, I'm not.
And
there isn't the buffer between, without that part of my brain where it needs to be to balance all this out.
That would be awful.
Well, see, you don't know what you're missing. That's the beauty of dyslexia, ADHD, autism, all of that. You have no idea what you're missing. One of the reasons
that people with neurodiversity often switch jobs a lot.
Sure.
Because
I cannot tell you how many times
how do you fit into?
I cannot tell you how many times I've been written up.
Oh yeah.
For being late. Like, I can't, and we're talking 5-10 minutes, but that's not the point. a lot of jobs are just like, you got to be on time. And I think I've mentioned this before, but this is the best time blindness anger story I have to share for myself, which was I was at a very good job in my last career and I loved what I was doing. And they pulled me aside and they said, you've been 5-10 minutes late the last, 3-4 months, whatever, 3-4 times. And they're just like, we can't have that. Like we start at 8 a.m. And I'm like, okay, I stay a half hour to 2 hours late. That's part of time blindness. You want to guess who your staff members are that are time blind? They're the ones that are sitting there staying late. I'll give you a hint.
Yes.
They're 5 or 10 minutes late for work and they are staying late because they're going to get that project done.
Because they're so enmeshed in it.
Right. And they want to
know
get
what
it done.
time it is and they want to get it done. And all of a sudden they look up and it's 7 p.m. and they've stayed at work 2 hours late.
Yes. I was doing that all the time. So I told them, I said, okay, we can do this.
Right.
I will be on time.
Right.
And I took everything.
But I will leave on time.
And
too.
I will. Exactly. And that took them about 2 weeks to decide wasn't what they actually wanted. Like there were times my boss was like, oh, I really need this. And I said, no, 5. I was here at 8 a.m. just as you asked. I was here actually 10 minutes early because that's what I got to do. And
if you're going to be,
let's
just take a second out and say, as an employer, if you're going to be petty about your time and people being on time for your time, and are you at your desk ready at 8 a.m. or did you walk in the door at 8 a.m. and then put your stuff away and get your coffee and then get to your desk at 8:07? If you're going to be that guy or person or woman, I'm not trying to call out men because I don't think men are the worst at this.
No.
If you're going to be that person, then that gives license to other people to do the same thing with their time boundaries.
Yes.
So
I became really strict about them. And they're like, we're not getting things in on time. Like we're having really big problems now that you're not here till 7 o'clock.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that wasn't my
call.
Yeah, I said, but I'm here on time. This is what you said was most important. And they decided that wasn't as important, but you cannot remove the shame, blame, and guilt that they layered on me for that.
And the other thing is, let's be real. When you're talking about a professional situation, if somebody's paying attention to whether you're there 5 minutes late or not, they're looking for something to write you up about. That's where I was at.
Yeah. I was just like,
now somebody's watching.
Right. And I'm like, okay, we can
otherwise it takes longer than 5 minutes to notice. So, from an employer standpoint, and when you're thinking about, reasonable accommodations for somebody with neurodiversity, you're thinking about, okay, if somebody with neurodiversity is willing to set timers for themselves, set alarms for themselves, to go through all of this effort to accommodate everybody else's kind of work schedule. And maybe it's not everybody else. That's the other thing. But but because some people are probably doing it in secret because of the blame and shame stuff.
Oh, they're trying.
Yep.
Really hard.
But if somebody else is willing to do that, what am I willing to do as an employer to accommodate that? And what am I willing to do as an employer to say, hey, you young person who maybe went through a lot of this in your life but never got called out on it, this might be a thing. You might want to look into this.
Yes. And that is exactly what, as I'm having these conversations, that's like everybody knows somebody.
Yeah.
Like as I talk about it and I'm like, here are the exact, examples, being late for meetings, work, picking up kids and any other appointments, missing a meeting or appointment altogether, cooking and mostly burning food, having a spouse that is always fighting with you to get out the door somewhere on time. Honest to goodness. Okay. The process to get my family to church, my mom was telling me this was over a 2.5 hour process. If my grandma was there, if it involved my grandmother, myself and 2 siblings, my mom and my dad, it was a 2.5 hour process. Gosh. She said they like mapped it out.
Like there's no reward at church.
Just to show up a couple minutes late and sit in the front row because that was the spot that was always open.
Right, because that's the shame spot is the front row.
Right, so we just aimed for we were first rowers just because it was an entire family.
Well, and what do you get at church? Stale bread. So
and seeing the backside of the guy was always exciting.
I shouldn't be so flippant. Some people find great value in that, and I'm not intending to.
But when you're cruising in late,
dismiss it. It just 2.5 hours is a lot.
Another item is overbooking your calendar.
Oh my God, you do that all the time.
Yep, and not including drive time.
Yes.
Yep. not understanding that, always running a little bit late, multitasking to an extreme,
Yep.
not completing projects on time, feeling exhausted like you are never getting ahead, losing jobs because of your tardiness and being reprimanded, and late paying bills. Like those are the really obvious ones. Like I love autopay. Like thank you very much for autopay and bill payer. Like,
well, and there's a lot of great tools out there now. I mean,
Well,
there's a
that's
lot
the
of great
thing.
productivity tools and things like that. But the point that isn't how do you work extra hard to adapt. The point is, how do we all understand time blindness as not a choice? How do we all understand it a little bit differently, see it a little bit differently, and have some space and some room in our culture for this conversation, and for the conversation that, so that those people showed up 10 minutes late to the movie. What, you interrupted the third preview for that stupid kids movie that you're not going to see anyway? Like, I'm so sorry. You walked in during like the president of the theater's like talk at the beginning.
Oh no.
Oh, I'm so upset. Like, or how do we give space for it in a restaurant where the food maybe took 5, 10, 15 more minutes than we expected? Or how do we leave space for it in professional situations where, like, I have clients who, if I'm a minute and a half late, they text me and find out where I am. Yeah. And I'm like, there could just be a difference in our clocks for that.
At that level. Yeah.
Like at that level, like give me 5 minutes because something might have happened. The last thing ran over. I was trying to say goodbye. Like all of those things take 2 minutes to do.
See, when people do things like that, that tells me so much about their empathy and their anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
So right away, I instantly know there's some empathy things going on, and then there's some anxiety. They're very there's an anxiety level, and that just tells me right away. I'm like, oh, we're running on the anxiety roller coaster. I'm like, okay,
and fear.
Yep, fear, anxiety, like all of that. So I'm like, okay, and then I just help them out. When I get there, I'm like, gosh, I should have told you this. Like,
so you have a list of things that people with time blindness can do to kind of impact. But I would say, and it's a good list. Yes. I mean, I'm sure you'll read it off for everybody. Yeah. But I also would say, I think that those who don't have time blindness need to think about a list for themselves.
Tell me more about that.
Well,
as a non-time blind person.
Well, because I think about this, podcasting with you and how we do this super early in the morning. Yes. And how both of us are commonly just running a few minutes by.
Right. Like we're cruising.
Because it's super early in the morning, you guys. Yeah. And you come from about 25. Yeah. It's like a 20, 25 minute drive. And you work really hard to be on time. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you work really hard to be on time. And you feel really bad when you're running late.
I do.
And you're really good about texting me when you're running late.
I'm improving on my communication. The more I've been able to embrace this and communicate about it, the more it's helped me to just communicate overall.
Right.
Because no less shame, blame, and guilt. Yeah. When you have that, you got to stay in your turtle.
Well, and I live closer, don't have the same length of get up routine that you do. Yep. Which is very obvious in how good both of our hair is, by the way. Like Georgina's hair is always awesome.
You were smart. Went with the practical cut.
Yes, I went with the I went with the Crocs haircut.
It's not it's got some brilliance there.
And I live closer and all of those things. And I'm not nearly as good as you are at communicating that I'm going to be late.
Because you're typically not late.
If I am, I know that I'm not a typically late person, quote unquote. And
I'm not going to get up in your grill.
And I know you're not going to get up in my grill. Mm-hmm. But I still should communicate with you proactively when I am running a little bit behind.
And we're working on that.
And we are working on that. But that's the thing. That goes on my list, not yours.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that.
And another, to add on to that.
I shouldn't just assume that you'll be okay with it because you're commonly late.
Yes. And that you're right. That is an obvious thing. I also have to acknowledge, now that we've identified this and there's been some stronger communication within my relationship with my husband, I have asked him if this is his event or his thing, I'm like, what time do I have to be ready?
Right.
So I am respectful of your time and your wanting to leave. And he's like, this time. I'm like, then put that time in the calendar.
Right. Don't put the time we have to be there.
No.
Put the time we have to leave.
Yep. And I'm like, just put that in there. He's like, okay. And he does. And I take it as my job to be in the car, fully ready, whether he's in there or not. I have sat in the car for 10, 15 minutes waiting for him. I do not care. I am in the car. I am ready to go.
Well, and
I'm not preventing us, but I can tell that my time blindness has actually rubbed off on him. He was never late for anything. He's been around me though for 10 some years, and it does this thing.
It's super easy to kind of like let it go and not feel so anxious about it.
Right.
When somebody that you're around. So like, I'll say to my partner, I get home, I'll call him and say, I'm going to be home in 10 minutes. I'll call you from the driveway. Can you be ready to go? And he says, yes. And then he continues to sit where he is.
Oh yeah. No, you got to be outside.
And then what happens is when I call, then he gets up, he goes to the bathroom, he finds his pants, he puts on his shoes, and then he comes out like, and it takes,
it's 10 minutes,
6 to 10 minutes to do that.
Yeah.
And it's this. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
It's this.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand that I'm literally standing by the door.
Yeah. And that's that improved communication. That's that improved understanding. So like when I have meetings, a like 2:30 meeting, that's a real kicker for me. A 30 anyways, or a 7, let's say 7 a.m.
Right.
It's not 7 a.m. on that clock until the 7 shows up.
Right.
So I'm living in 6:58 and 6:59 because it's still 6 something. Just like they price crap $7.99 because it's not $8.
Yes.
The damn clock, digital clock works the same way for me. Even a handed clock. It's like, well, it's getting closer, but it's not quite that time. Well, you still have to drive, goober. Like, there's still time. So yeah, all of my appointments include drive time. There's a little look for drive time, and I can't actually know that it's only 40. Like, I have a client that's 30 minutes away.
Sure.
But I put in 45 minutes to drive.
Yeah, because
once I figured out it was only 30,
your stuff, and
I cheated now. Now I'm flying in right at that line.
Yeah, but you need to like pack up your stuff and get into the car, and all of this takes time. And I had this conversation with with my leadership team because of parking. We're downtown. The parking ramps are, block and a half away. And it's not a big deal to walk a block and a half. You get to work in the morning, you walk a block and a half, you go inside. But I leave 2 or 3 times a day, most days.
Right.
And my schedule doesn't accommodate an extra 15 minutes on every single one of those.
No, it does not.
Both
I've seen
there
your schedule.
and back.
I've seen that schedule.
Both leaving and back, an extra 15 or 20 minutes to... And maybe it won't take 15, but it probably will. Right. By the time you pack your stuff, walk to the car, in a ramp, get up to the ramp, drive through the ramp.
Accommodate for the fact that the fire truck might go by while you're driving. And you have to pull over, and that adds 2 to 3 minutes.
It adds 2 to 3 minutes. And when your schedule is back to back to back to back to back, it's I need to be able to just stand up and walk out the door and get in my car.
Yeah.
And yes, that costs more money.
It does.
It costs more money for us on the time side too.
Right.
So it's both of those things.
And value.
So we're starting to wander, but why don't you, because this is how this happens. It is a good. So why don't you read off the list of what people with time blindness can do? And then those of us who don't have time blindness can feel bad about all the ways we made people accommodate us.
Don't do that.
No. I mean, I think it's a cultural thing, right? It's a cultural expectation.
I get to do this better in the future.
I get to do this better in the future.
That's really because
okay, fine. No shame and blame for you then either.
No,
you get to do this better in the future.
When people are not at that exact time punctually, if I'm sitting there, I have a 15-minute rule. Like if you're 15 minutes late, I want to know you're alive. And that's really what I tell them. Just tell me everything's okay.
Yeah.
And in that 15 minutes, I'm sorry, but we have those mini computers.
Yeah. I have answered 6 emails. I don't mind when people are late. I look at
it as bonus time.
Yeah.
That's how I gift an opportunity, that one right away. I'm like, oh, they're not here. I'm like, sweet. We're just going to keep plowing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got stuff to do. Like, this is not a problem. So if that's helpful, like helping yourself release the anxiety about that and picking the time limit. Like
and understanding that if somebody's 15 minutes late to a 30-minute meeting, they still only got 30 minutes of your time.
Right.
They don't get another extra 15.
Right. And I'm clear about that. I'm like, okay, we got 15 minutes. We're going to have to plow.
We're gonna have to plow
what
through.
do you want to
Yeah.
make sure happens? One of the first things I always tell people that's really important, common trait, learn you. Like learn and understand that you have this, learn how to communicate this, learn how to own that this is going to get on things. And it's there, and allow people to communicate about it. Use timers, use reverse timers, use talking timers, use timers. Cannot say it enough. Use alarms, partnering. This is a really great tool, especially within work environments. If people
Sure.
can talk about it, is partnering up. If someone's consistently late for a meeting and you really do need them there and the meeting's starting on time, you partner them with the person that's always the earliest to the meeting. And that person
Sure.
swings by their desk. And this is a communicate, like everybody talks about it. This
Right.
person's going to come and get you. And when she's there, she's only going to give you 2 minutes, and then she's going to unplug your computer.
And I would
Or
say
put your lid down.
have
for
the
it.
conversation with that person first, so they
Oh, yeah.
understand what they're doing. Otherwise, that's a breeding ground for resentment.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
it's a full communication conversation.
Yep.
But you partner them with coworkers, family, friends, those kind of things. People who can be compassionate, but also be like, I realize you're not aware of this, but this is
Or find out, or like, hey, let's go get that cup of coffee now, so we're on time for the meeting.
right. Exactly.
Yeah, let's go. Let's have a chat and go get that cup of coffee now, and we get to have the social moment.
Exactly. Remove as much anxiety from your daily living. What that means is things like getting your outfit together the night before, packing your lunch the night before, things like that you aren't accommodating. If you have time blindness, you're not accommodating for that time. So those are things you put, you prepare ahead so that you can just grab and go. And so you're
Gotcha.
not getting sidetracked by it.
That's why he does that.
Yep. Calculate down to the small action steps. So like I said, in my calendar, it says the drive time. It'll even say before that, prepping before the drive time. Like I have to have all that written out. Fact check your time estimate. I do that a lot. Projects, those kind of things. I'm like, this will take, because I have a big timesheet that I keep for every day. I'm like, I think this project will take an hour. And then I time it. Sometimes it in the end, it'll be a 3-4 hour project.
Oh my gosh, I totally do that.
Completely misled it. Or other times, that thing that, again, that inner conversation, that hour thing, 10 minutes later, I'm done.
Yeah.
And
And I feel silly.
bonus time.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm all for that. But by fact checking it, you can go back to your facts.
Sure.
I can go
Sure.
back and go, this only took this long last time, and I have that information.
Yeah.
Hire people. If in my case, I hire people to help and assist with my long-term planning. I have a financial planner. Like I have people that stay on top of those things for me. I write out my daily schedule because that uses a different part of my brain.
Oh.
It takes me a matter of seconds, but I actually have my own daily schedule and I write that out. I miss far less appointments when I do that. I'm on time for appointments when I do that. My brain becomes
Interesting.
aware of today's
So rather than like
schedule.
calendar staring at you all the time, relying on that, you look at that in the morning and write everything down in order.
Yep, on one sheet where I'm keeping track of all the things that I'm doing throughout
Sure,
the day so that I
sure.
can invoice customers properly. So,
Yep.
and so I don't, this is another problem with time blindness. You can get to the end of the day and say you didn't do a darn thing and feel like a horrible person. Like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I didn't do a dang thing today. That's actually what started it, is I was shaming myself so bad at the end of the day. You didn't get anything done today. Like, what in the world did you do with your day? And so I had to start to keep track of it. And that led to, oh my gosh, my day was robust and full.
Yeah.
But my brain
No wonder
wasn't-
I'm exhausted.
Right. But my brain wasn't retaining any of that. And
Yeah.
it also wasn't invoicing people nearly enough. It was a win-win when we started doing that, let me tell you. Yeah. So that kind of covers a lot
Sounds
of
like
the
you
things.
want to coach with time blindness if they're not going to invoice you.
Uh-huh. I was like, it works out so well. But this allows, I hope in this conversation, it's allowed you to have some humor about this, but now maybe have a little more compassion and understanding for members of your family, for loved ones, for
For that artistic
coworkers.
person who just
Yes.
can never get anywhere on time.
Yes.
Your little sister who just can't read a clock, whatever the family joke is.
Yes.
Maybe it needs to change.
And yes, please. It would be great.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to If These Heels Can Talk. We hope we have helped you understand a little bit more about neurodiversity in a specific way with time blindness. And we hope you have a great week. Be on
Bye.
time. Okay, this is probably not when I should end that. We're 10 minutes over.
I know, because it was an exciting and fascinating topic. We couldn't just minimize it.